Um, Unrestricted warfare, obviously, and what is being implemented, what is happening, and then on the other side of things, the economic transition that is occurring. I mean, I'm just, I'm I consume the news that's happening all day long. This is what I do for a living. I just take the news in, and I watch these people who are, top of the line alternative media or traditional media, and financial shows and all this stuff, and it's like nobody sees it, nobody gets it, nobody understands it, and it's like nobody is even talking about these things. So what I wanted to do tonight is, we got some news to go through, we're going to go through that, but it's going to transition into this conversation. What's happening with Iran? Why is Iran so important? What you know, I was listening to something earlier, and they're like, why did Donald Trump have to do what he did in Iran? Why didn't he just go out there and wage the economic warfare? Like, it's about one of the dumbest fucking things I've ever heard in my life. If you didn't do the initial military operation in Iran, you cannot do a blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. Like, people don't logically think with military strategies and tactics and how these things operate and fit into all of this. So we're going to get into the news. We're going to talk a lot about this type of stuff. And the reason I think it is important is because of what we are going to be seeing occur and roll out over the course of the next few months. All right, let's get rocking and rolling. Donald Trump resurrects the snake poem. And he did this in South Carolina, and then went on a lengthy post about Massey, MTG, and Tucker. So I wonder who he's talking about in this. But let's go ahead and play this real quick. I don't know if I want to play the whole thing. We've all heard it many times.
So this is from an old song with some changes, and I just think it's so apropos, especially when you hear of the story I just told you. And it's called The Snake, and it represents our border and the horrible people that this country has allowed into our country through the Obama and the Biden administrations. On her way to work one morning, down the path along the lake, a tender-hearted woman saw a poor, half-frozen snake. Her pretty colored skin had been all frosted with the dew. Poor thing, she cried, I'll take you in, and I'll take care of you. Take me in, oh tender woman, take me in for heaven's sake. Take me in, oh tender woman, sighed the vicious snake. She wrapped him up all cozy in a comforter of silk and laid him by her fireside with some honey and some milk. She hurried home from work that night, and soon as she arrived, she found the pretty snake she'd taken in had been revived. Take me in, O tender woman, take me in for heaven's sake. Take me in, O tender woman, cried the vicious snake. She clutched him to her bosom. You're so beautiful, she cried. But if I hadn't brought you in by now, you truly would have died. She stroked his pretty skin again and kissed and held him tight. But instead of saying, thank you, ma'am, the snake gave her a vicious bite. Take me in, O tender woman. Take me in for heaven's sake. Take me in, O tender woman, sighed the vicious snake. I saved you, cried the woman, and you've bitten me, but why? You know your bite is poisonous, and now I'm going to die. Shut up, silly woman, said the reptile with a grin. You knew damn well I was a snake before you took me in. That's our border. That's our border.
It's more than our border. It's a lot of people in the midst. It's a lot of people that are out there right now within this movement, outside of this movement, in foreign countries and various different adversaries, within the Democrat Party, within the Republican Party. They are all over. And yes, they will absolutely give you that lethal strike of that bite when they are done using you. That is the absolute truth. And that's why we have a motto here at the Red Pill Project. It's never believe anything anybody tells you, no matter who they are or what authority they possess or profess, unless you can prove it through your own research, your own investigation, through your own inquiry, and through your own will and volition. And the reason I say that is because don't trust anybody. It's hard. It's hard these days. I know. Maybe your kids and your spouse or something like that. But other than that, in this world, when we're talking about politics and the realignments that are happening in the world, I wouldn't trust any of them. But I think Donald Trump there was talking more about Tucker Carlson, MTG, and Massey, and a few others in that group and crowd, which I think is going to play out in some way, shape, or form to be completely KFAB. That's just my theory. I'm probably wrong, but I think that it's a good indication. Now, why do I say that? I say that because I have a gift of being able to see how things are going to kind of play out, or at least understand. And right now we are watching the end of the Democratic Party. I think that we all understand that. With the investigations going in with Act Blue, the foreign money that was flowing out through USAID, flowing back into the Biden administration, everything that's being uncovered right now by the Trump DOJ, by Congress, so forth, we can understand that the left, the Democratic Party, is going to transgress further left into socialism, and that's going to produce an outfalling, specifically after the midterms. If the midterms performance for the Democrats is very bad, which I hope, and I'm actually believe that that's what's going to happen. If the midterm performance for the Democrats is really bad, this is going to be one of the last fatal blows for the Democrats, which means that you're going to have moderates and independents that typically lean left. You're going to have a lot of people who are on the left, but are more kind of center left or right left, that are probably going to be looking for a new home. And so if you were a leader of a large movement like MAGA, like Trump's the leader of MAGA, and you understood this, you understood the various aspects of movement warfare that were being played on the American people, and you knew that there was going to come a point in time when this one political party was going to have a massive exodus from it. Wouldn't you pre-position people well far in advance that the only way that you know that they could start a successful political party is to begin pulling away from the original base of your party and produce this anti-Trump or anti-MAGA narrative? And with that, you have these three massive influencers, one congressman, one former congressman, Tucker Carlson, and then Alex Jones, all these people associated with that begin to start turning on Trump and start, or what appears to be turning on Trump, going against his policies. But yet they still have an alignment that is America first in perspective. And why would you orchestrate that? Why would you construct that to happen? The reason you would do that is if you wanted to catch the vacuum of all the people on exodus out of the left. Where are they going to go? Who's going to capture them? Do you want the socialists and the communists to capture them? Or do you want to catch them with another political movement that is just as forceful as MAGA has been, the populist movement, but is still aligned and directed towards America first? That's my theory. I don't know if it's true. We will find out. But I think that there's probably more truth to that than anything. Moving forth here, talking about this is, I get so many emails, messages, DMs from a lot of different people. Tell me their thoughts and their opinions on different people, on different things. What they think of people or all this, and then what they've watched, what's happening, who the influencers were that they've watched, and why they listen to me now, or whatever it might be. But there's a lot of stuff happening right now, specifically in the X world, between various different influencers and platforms. And there's like this small little war going on. And I try to stay out of it. I don't really like drama or that shit. I don't want anything to do with it. I'm not associated with 99% of these people, so I have nothing to do with it, but people tag me in this stuff anyways. But I wrote this earlier, and I think that this is really important to be said. Many people in these movements are disappointed that the plan didn't unfold the way certain anons and online personalities convinced them it would. Others voted for the end of the globalist regime and to save our country. And I would agree that Trump is doing exactly what he promised. The disconnect is how people expected it to happen. They expected a moment, a dramatic reveal, mass arrests, a single event where the old system collapsed and everyone finally understood what was happening. Instead, what we are watching is a process. Institutions being challenged, old alliances being challenged, being disrupted, global relationships being renegotiated, entrenched power structures being exposed and confronted, and perhaps most importantly, power and responsibility being pushed back towards the American people. The last part matters. Trump repeatedly talked about returning power to the American people, yet somewhere along the way, the people began waiting for someone else to exercise that power for them. We are the plan, not because presidents, generals, or people inside governments don't matter. They do. But none of them can permanently restore a republic if its citizens remain spectators. Our role is to become informed, to question, to expose corruption, to participate, to build, to demand accountability from the institutions that supposedly serve us, and yes, even from the administrations we voted for. This isn't turning against the movement. That is the movement. I've understood from the beginning that this was never going to happen the way many people imagined it would. This is why you have a lot of people that say things are going to happen and then they move the goalpost over and over and over and over again, right? So before declaring that nothing has happened or everyone was fooled or Trump abandoned what he promised, consider another possibility. Maybe you're measuring what is happening against someone else's predictions instead of Trump's actual promises. The question was never whether reality would match every theory posted online. The question is whether Trump is doing what he said he would do and whether we are finally willing to do our part. Because returning power to the people only works if the people are willing to use it. We aren't waiting for the plan. We are the plan. And I've talked about this extensively on this show, during the Biden administration, during the first Trump administration. And one of the things I've said over and over repeatedly is that there is a fourth branch of government. That fourth branch of government was hijacked in the early 20th century with the integration of the lobby. And the lobby was brought about because big, large corporations believed that they had a say within the political process. And in context, they do, and the Supreme Court sided with them, and this allowed for the creation of the lobby, and special and private interest and foreign money and all of this stuff began to flood into the coffers of political campaigns. And this is where it got out of hand, because what happened is that money, that power, that influence drained out the voice of the Americans who had held the power for a very, very long time. And what we're seeing right now is we are seeing that transition back to the American people, but only if the American people wake up to that level of responsibility and be held to it. With various different things we've seen over the last year. If you remember Cracker Barrel, Cracker Barrel is a great example of the power of the American people, or the power of social media and amplification through the American people. The CEO said that she believes she felt like she was fired by the American people, because she was. But the American people spoke up and demanded it so outright that they'd change it back to the way it was, that the president even got involved and they changed it. They stopped the transition that they were making. Think about Budweiser. Think about all of the other ones that went woke. What happened to them? through the protest of the American people, through the outrage of the American people and their voice, they transitioned and changed these various different radical idealisms that were coming about within these corporations back to what they truly wanted. Well, guess what? That same power works in government, but it's only when the American people stand up and demand that from their representatives that the representatives will start to listen to the constituents. What do we mean by that? You have to have enough powerful force within the social accord that is directed towards a representative within his own district. His constituents need to stand up and express their outrage, their demand for accountability before they're ever going to do anything. If not, you are drowned out by foreign and special interest and large corporations financing and funding. And so we have to learn how to take back our power within this system that has been created. The system isn't broken. The system was created this way. And the reason we say it's created this way is because over the last 250 years, this is what's been voted on, and this is the rules and the laws and the regulations and policies that have come about. And so now the American people, trying to find out where they fit in this system, are at a turn point where we have to figure out how our voice truly does matter and the power that we actually have to direct government to do what we demand. And so, with that, I just encourage everybody to do their part. Run for local office, become engaged within local politics, become vocal with your voice. It's not all about your voice. It's all about being able to influence movement and change within a local, a state, or a federal structure. That is how we win at this game. And we have to be able to amplify that type of messaging tenfold to reach Congress or the White House. But when it begins to happen, when that precipice begins to come, that's where the real transitional change begins to occur in this country. I like what this guy just said. Bro, USA is fucked. LOL, soon Trump will be gone and it'll be chaos. I disagree with that. And the reason I disagree with it, it's kind of a funny comment, and it's one perspective you can take on what is happening right now. That once Trump is gone, once he's out of office, that's it. It's over. Well, you have new leaders that are going to step up within this movement. Now, the problem with that is no populist movement really ever survives that next variation, which means that you need a new movement to actually drive that next populist encounter. And I think that that's what we're in the midst of tonight. And this is actually what we're going to talk about tonight and why that is actually so important, because everything that we're about to see happen over the course of the next 2 years to 5 years, I think is going to drive the next administration. And I'll get into this. I'm going to get into this and explain why I think that this is truly important. Now, a few things that I'm going to critique here is you have Scott putting this out there with Harmeet Dillon. I'm going to play this right now, and I'm going to tell you how just gay this actually is. It's not fake and gay, but it's fucking definitely bullshit. But let's pull this up here real quick.
There are gaps that Congress could fill by updating, for example, Help America Vote Act and the National Voter Registration Act, UOCAVA, and the Voting Rights Act. And so, that's for Congress to do. They certainly could make things better. The SAVE Act is pending and the subject of national discussion right now. I think voter ID is a critical measure, and historically, both parties have questioned whether mail balloting, the Carter-Baker Commission, mail balloting is a safe and secure way of running our elections. So all of that could be tightened up. But on top of that, we have federal criminal statutes on the books that for decades have almost never been enforced by the Department of Justice. And so I sent out a notice to top election officials in 50 states, reminding them that knowingly allowing non-citizens to vote in federal elections in their states is a crime. And there's a lot of pearl clutching, hue and cry, and running around like crazy. But I don't make the laws; I just enforce them. And there are laws on the books that say that.
Okay, Harmeet Dillon. A few different things about what she just said. Number one, she's absolutely right. There are tons of different things that Congress can do right now, and they're not. We'll get into that in a minute of why Congress is not doing them. But she's talking about two different things that they're taking in importance of the Civil Rights Department over the Department of Justice and what they're doing in the midterm elections. Number one, they're sending 1,000 election monitors across the country to all these states. And these states are like, oh my God, you can't send them here. It happens every fucking election. I mean, there's no difference what Harmeet Dillon is doing by sending 1,000 people out. Joe Biden's administration, I believe in the midterms in 2022, sent like 3,200 observers to various different points around the country. So number one is anybody out there like, oh my God, this is going to change things. No, it happens every election. And the federal government sends these people out every damn election. That is not something that I'm looking at as like, yes, we're going to win. No, that type of stuff is just nonsense. It's protocol. But what she said at the end here is that she sent out a notification to all these different states pertaining to illegals voting in their elections. Once again, I'm going to go on this whole tirade about this. Number one is she said it. She goes, the federal government has never prosecuted this. That's right. It only matters if and only if the federal government is willing to investigate and prosecute this, which to this day has not happened. Prime example, California primaries. So Harmeet Dillon is sending a letter out to all these states saying, hey, look, if you let illegals vote in your election, that is prosecute. Who the hell are you going to prosecute? Who are you gonna prosecute the illegals? You're gonna prosecute the election volunteers or workers there? You're gonna prosecute the governor or the secretary of state? You're not gonna prosecute anybody. This is why they don't prosecute anybody, because somebody at a polling location letting an illegal vote can claim, oh, ignorance. I didn't know. I'm not a state elected official. I'm not right. And the governor's not going to go down. The secretary of state's not going to go down for it. It's nonsense. And secondly, is that you actually find out that illegal immigrants, they don't actually, it's not a large proportion of the amount of people that vote in our elections. You have to understand why the Democrats have imported all the illegal immigrants and then get them registered to vote. If you go back to 2020 and you watched what happened, what'd they do? They had all of these various different organizations that went out there and got people registered to vote, illegal aliens, homeless people. They didn't give a shit who they were. They just wanted them to register because they wanted that number. This was why the importance of the 2020 census, why they wanted to count illegal aliens, because they needed that number inflated. They needed the number of actual registered voters in a state, in a district, inflated. Why? We saw it in Arizona, where a warehouse, abandoned warehouse, was one of the addresses of over 124 people who registered to vote. And guess what happened? They sent the ballots there, but the ballots weren't there. So someone picked those ballots up, filled them out, submitted them, but not the people that registered to vote. Same thing happens with illegal aliens. You just need that number so that now you can justify printing out 100 million ballots for a general election. And you can mail them all out in each one of these different states. And then guess what happens? Like the stories that we heard in Pennsylvania. There was Craigslist advertisements. If you don't remember this from the 2020 election, in Pennsylvania, there's Craigslist advertisements paying $10 an hour to fill out ballots. In somebody's garage, they spent over $30,000 to people who were just sitting there filling out ballots. Where the hell did they get the ballots? Oh, well, it's pretty easy if you're registering all these illegal immigrants with fake and false addresses and all these other people with fake addresses. They compile all of these ballots into one central location, fill them all out for one candidate that you want. Why was it in Georgia that we had people voting only for the general election, only for Joe Biden? They voted for no congressmen, no senators. They voted for no other candidates, only the president one time. And there was over 15,000 votes like that. It's about being able to justify the printing of all of these ballots. Because if you had true voter rolls, right? Let's assume that a district has 50,000 voters. Well, you clean up that voter roll. Now there's only 28,000, and each 28,000 is a confirmed American citizen voter. Now this completely changes the whole dynamic of what we're talking about. This is why they inflow that. So say that like we're gonna prosecute people if illegal aliens vote in our, dude, who the hell are you gonna prosecute? Who? The people that allowed it to happen, the state assemblies, the Secretary of State, yeah, that's who should get prosecuted, but that's not who they will prosecute. Hermie Dillon isn't warning these states because she's going to go after the governor or the Secretary of State. She's warning the states because they're going to go after the illegal alien or the one woman who volunteered her time to be there to hand out ballots and didn't freaking know. That's the bullshit of the system right now. That's the nonsense of the system that we have to put up with this. You know, if they wanted strategic voter reform, we'd have it. But they don't want it. They don't care for it. The Republicans and Democrats don't want it in the Senate or Congress. They don't want it in the state assemblies because they like the system the way it is, because they can easily manipulate the system to their own benefit. If they don't like a congressman, hey, not hard to primary him if you control the voting structure. What is Madison Cawthorn? Right? Do you think that he just lost his primary because his constituents didn't vote for him? They listened to somebody else? No. That shit was stolen right out from under his feet, because that's the level of power and control that the establishment has, the uni party has. So we're going to keep on going here. There was a part here. Oh yeah, this is actually. So I'm going to get into ways that we can actually secure the midterms here in a second. We already know about this, but I'm going to play this part with Wayne Allen Root and Bannon here real quick.
Yeah.
Not the full 4 minutes either.
Do you believe, sir, that you, through either Bill Pulte or John Solomon's task force, all these stories are breaking every day on Gateway Pundit and Breitbart, do you believe the predicate has been laid for the President of the United States to take your draft and other drafts and actually sign it and execute it, sir?
Yes. I mean, it's very clear. I mean, during my TV interview with President Trump about 10 days ago, it was my 17th interview with the president. We have a great relationship, and I brought up a story during that interview, and the press ignored it. Nobody said anything about it, Steve. During the interview, I said, are you aware of a illegal alien in Connecticut, a woman who, driving her car, ran over a cop, killed him? The cop was with his girlfriend, who has 3 kids, killed her. They now don't have a parent. And that illegal alien was driving drunk and high on cannabis. And that illegal alien was registered to vote and had voted in all recent elections in Connecticut. So my point being that the examples are there every day. And during that interview, the president said to me, Wayne, I don't know that story. Can you send it to me? And I sent it to him the next day. I wrote up a column about it, and I sent it to him. Right there is a predicate. Right there is an illegal alien that killed a cop and a woman, a mother, high, drunk, and registered to vote and voting. Right here in Las Vegas, illegals are registered every day because once you get a driver's license, and it's 100% legal in Nevada and 19 other states and Washington, D.C., to be an illegal alien to get a driver's license, once you go to DMV to get the driver's license, you're automatically registered to vote. We all know it's happening. But here's the thing, Steve. He doesn't need a predicate. He needs it to sell it PR-wise to the American people, yes. He doesn't need it to declare a national security emergency. There is no predicate needed. When he did it in 2019, which was my idea then, I went to the president, I wrote a column, I sent it to him. I had my best buddy, who's Trump's best friend at Mar-a-Lago, put it in his hands and say, you've got to read this. It's from Wayne Root. And 2 days later, he came out with the National Security Emergency for Borders, exactly as I wrote it, that the Congress cannot overturn a national security emergency without a 2/3 vote from both houses of Congress. And he did it in 2019, and it serves as the model, the example. Congress could not overturn it. They tried. They went with a joint resolution, and President Trump vetoed it Once it's vetoed, then they have to get a 2/3 vote to overcome the veto. They could not do it. The same thing applies today. He doesn't need a predicate, Steve. He just declares a national security emergency. Now, use the predicates to go out and sell it to the American people. But I would just simply ask a simple question. He needs to do this day and night. Ask the question. This is about election security. A, do you feel elections are safe? Do you feel elections are not being stolen? Are you confident they're not being rigged? If they're not being rigged, why are Democrats so scared and desperate and panicked and hysterical to stop voter photo ID and proof of citizenship? And also, why do they love mail-in ballots? When every other country in the world doesn't allow mail-in ballots because it leads to fraud.
Okay. He said a lot there. It was a little bit longer than the clip I wanted to play, but good job, Wayne. And by the way, for Wayne Allen Root talking about the election, national emergency on election integrity and infrastructure, this is something that I've been talking about since 2025, Trump, at the beginning of the administration, when this all came about. And I said, this is going to be the only way that we're going to win the midterms, because there's no way you're going to have statewide implementation of any type of bill that Congress brings about before that time. And now, Wayne Allen Root said, ask the American people, why are Democrats so desperate? If there isn't rigging, if there isn't cheating, if there isn't stealing, why are they so scared of such simple things that merely lead to election security? He's got a great point here. Now, I said this. Now apply that to the Senate and the Republicans that will not play ball. It's the same establishment. It's the same uni party, okay? The neocons and various different establishment Republicans are playing on the same side as the Democrats who are resisting all of this. And yes, we have to vote them out. We have to find ways to get them out. And yes, it means we have to clean up our elections in order to do this. But the idea here is that our system is never going to be safe and secure if we allow the foxes in the henhouse to keep on making the rules and the laws. Makes sense? Right. So, last 24 hours, the United States Postal Service has just moved forward and published its regulations to fortify mail-in ballots complying with President Trump's executive order signed in March. Now, the New York Times are reframing this as restricting mail-in voting, when in reality it secures our elections, making sure only Americans vote and are on the voter rolls, punishing states that do not comply. And if you remember, the Postmaster General came out and said that, hey, I fully intend to comply with the executive order issued by President Trump pertaining to the post office's ability to handle mail-in ballots. Now, all mail-in ballots, the one thing that the federal government has in play here, have to go through the United States Postal Service. They can't go through private FedEx, UPS. They have to go through the United States Postal Service, which gives the United States Postal Service a prime ability to implement the law. And what they're trying to do through the executive order is the post office has requested from various different states their voter rolls and their QR codes matching the people on the voter rolls with the appropriate addresses. Now, federal election law states that, hey, look, if you are registered to vote in an election, you have to have this address, and this address must match this. So it's just like on a driver's license. So what the post office is going to do is they're going to take the state voter rolls, and then they're going to match that to the QR code for the mail-in ballots that are being sent out, and they're going to match that pertaining to their records, which they have. Which means that they can basically get rid of tons of people that no longer exist on those voter rolls. And that's one of the things I've been talking about, citizens on paper only. I reported on it last week in Michigan. Was it over 10,000 people voted in the last election that don't even exist? They were just made up names and addresses. This is the real concern. This is what we're talking about, is ghost population, if you want to. Is that, number one, do I believe the American population is 380 million and growing? No, I don't. I think that maybe it's 200 million if that. But they have to hyperinflate these numbers. Is the global population 9 billion? No, I don't think so. I think it's maybe about 2 to 3 billion. Then, Josh, why did they lie about global population numbers? Well, number one is, let's just do and I'm going to deviate away from the election fraud stuff, but I want to also show you why that they amplify those numbers for a specific reason. It's so that they have justification to print up 30,000, 50,000, 100,000, 4 million, 10 million ballots to mail out to people so they can steal elections. So do I think the American population is 380 billion or 380 million? No. Do I believe the global population is 9 billion? No, absolutely not. It's actually mathematically impossible for the global population to be 9 billion people. Mathematically impossible. Anybody good at math out there? At the turn of the 20th century, the year 1900, the estimated global population was approximately 1 billion people. Over the course of the next 50 years, you had the Spanish flu, you had World War I, World War II, you had the Great Depression, you had the rise of communism and socialism, and amongst that is about 400 to 500 million people killed. So either the amount of people killed during that time, this isn't even including regular natural death process. If you just look at the number of people killed during the time, either that number is hyper inflated or our population currently is hyperinflated. The reason being is because when you take into the account the amount of people that were killed in the first 50, 60 years of the 20th century, with a population at 1 billion estimated in 1900, that means that every person alive in 1900 would have to have 9 kids. Those kids would have to have 9 kids. Those kids would have to have 9 kids. Those kids would have to have 9 kids. And those kids would have to have 9 kids in order to get to a population of 9 billion today. And we know that that did not happen. Actually, it's quite the opposite, because what you had is you had the Flexner report that came out. You had the transition away from apothecaries and old school medicine into pharmaceutical-based medicine, which basically then what you see is a decline within the birth rate over the course of the last 60 years. It's impossible to have a population of 9 billion people. Anybody that's good at math goes out there and they can show me, well, Josh, you're missing these points and let's do this. No, India's got 1.2 billion people, Josh. India can't even fucking take care of human shit moving through pipes, let alone do an accurate census of their people. Well, China's got 1 billion people, Josh. No, China has ghost cities that were built, and they just sentenced the guy who financed these ghost cities, Evergrande CEO, to life in prison. What do they have? They have cities, massive cities that they built that nobody lives in, and there's nobody for these cities. China had the one-child policy for 30 freaking years. Controlled their whole population through contraceptions and through various other types of things. And their population grew and expanded. 1 billion? You had the Maoist revolution that killed, 40, 50 million people? There's no way they have 1 billion people. China's population is probably closer to about, I would say, 300 million people. 200 to 300 million people. Probably equivalent to that of the United States of America. When you do the math, it doesn't make sense. So then you ask yourself, why, Josh? Why would they lie about the global population? Why would they lie and say that there's 9 billion people? Well, it's pretty simple. When you start to look at it, it comes down to one thing: money, wealth, and power, and control. You know, if there was only 200 million people in the United States of America, do you think that they could get away with the amount of taxes that they charge all of us? Do you think they can get away with a $3.1 trillion federal budget and $40 trillion of national debt? When you realize that U.S. foreign aid was going out to all these countries, and that foreign aid going to a certain country to feed their poor and poverty-stricken people was based upon population numbers that the UNESCO or the UN or so forth are putting out there, then you start to understand that NGOs who are going out there and assisting these third world country governments or even these first world country governments, these international cabalist organizations, United Nations, going out there and helping do these census reports on the population of Cambodia, right? They go out there, they tell you, oh, Cambodia, it's got 8.7 million people. And then they send that out to the United Nations. They update that information, and now aid's going to flow to that country. It's the same NGOs that just helped to depict that number are the ones that are going to be the beneficiaries of that money that is going to go out there and feed them rice and beans. You know, on the southern border of the United States of America, when we had 23 plus million people cross over the southern border of the United States, during the Biden administration, okay, there was literally cartel warehouses that were built on the southern border, and these became holding facilities for these illegal migrants that would come up into the border area. And you have to ask yourself, like, what do you mean holding areas? Well, let me explain to you this process. Number one is you had a UN facility at the Darien Gap. If you don't know where that is, that's in Panama. You're like, well, hold on a second. I thought these were like Mexican immigrants coming in and not Mexican and Guatemalan and Honduras. And no. This was South. This was Venezuelan. But they weren't Venezuelan. They were African. They were Middle Eastern. They were Chinese coming into Venezuela. And then coming over Bridge of America into the Darien Gap, where they'd meet with UN workers and they would get, oh, here's your beans and rice, and here's your food, and here's your travel pack, and have a great journey to the United States. And you got to start asking fucking questions here. Like, 23 million people came over the U.S. southern border. We knew about the Darien Gap, and not one person, and I'll throw this out, not Trump, not one person in his administration, not one person in his campaign, nobody on the left, not one Republican ever asked, well, how the fuck are they getting to Venezuela? Not one person. How the hell are they getting to Venezuela? If they're coming from Africa, China, the Middle East, how the fuck are they getting to Venezuela? Not one person. That's a boat or a plane. And if it's a plane, that's a lot of money. If it's a boat, that's still a lot of money. 23 million people. If you think the average price from Middle East or Africa or China to get into Venezuela from there, that's got to be $1,000. $1,000 times 23 million people. Oh my God, you're talking about billions of dollars. Who funded that? It wasn't the NGOs paying for that. I guarantee you that. It was some nation state. Was it Venezuela? No. Was it Iran? No, Iran's been under Western sanctions for a long time. The Ayatollah wasn't about to spend his own money to do that. China. China's who fucking funded it. Various other international organizations who siphon off U.S. aid funded it. But then these people would move all the way up to the U.S. southern border. And this is where it gets interesting. When they got to the U.S. southern border, right, there was these holding facilities ran by NGOs, international and U.S. NGOs, the same ones that are receiving billions of dollars from the Biden administration. And they take these people in and they put mats and cots down so they could sleep there. And they would stay there for a minimum 2 weeks. 2 freaking weeks. And you got to ask yourself why. It was because the NGOs were the facilitators, the handlers of these people. What the NGOs would do is when a person came in, they said, hey, do you have someone in the United States that you're going to see or visit, or is there someone you're going to go live with? And they'd be like, yes. And they would say, hey, this is the person that I'm supposed to, this is my contact. They're in Baltimore, Maryland. And so now that NGO would call up the federal government and they would say, hey, I got 4 people going to Baltimore, Maryland. I need a plane in Dallas, Texas, or Houston, or El Paso, or wherever it is, where I need to acquire transportation. Plus, I'm going to need a hotel. And then when they get to Baltimore, I want to be able to put them into this hotel, that this is the one that we are using, that we have reserved for us. And then we need social workers to be there when they arrive. Their estimated date of arrival is in 3 weeks. And then we need compensation to house them in our facility on the other side of the border in Mexico for the next 2 weeks, including room, board, and food and all this stuff. And so what then would happen is the NGO would charge the U.S. federal government, the Biden administration, $1,000 to $2,000 a week to allow these people to sleep on cots and eat beans and rice. And then when the federal government came back and said, hey, we got the plane ticket, the social workers are going to be at the hotel's all booked, everything's all good, then they let them pass through the border being taken over by cartel members. I shit you, this is what was happening. I don't even know. We were talking about the post office. So now ask yourself, what was that all about? Why were NGOs and the globalist organizations involved in that? Money, power, control. They exploited the system. $2,000 to house a person a week on a cot on the floor eating beans and rice. So when you send $20 billion of aid to a foreign third world country, you're thinking that the government of that country is like, thank you so much. And they go out, they go grocery shopping, they're getting fucking Cheerios and fruit bars and Coca-Colas. No, that's not how it happens. That government is only accepting that money because deals have been made prior to that of how they're going to distribute it to the various NPOs, nonprofit organizations, and non-government organizations that are operating within the framework of that third world country. And then those organizations are the ones that get the distribution of the money. Then they go out there and they buy the beans and the rice. They will go out there and they buy the canned water in a fucking can. And then they charge what? For every meal, for every can of water, well, that's $87.50 because that's just how much it costs to get it here. It's a scam. Population is a scam. Inflating the population numbers has created one of the largest wealth transfers away from legitimate actual people into the hands of NGOs, globalist organizations, large financial institutions, and governments. That's the truth. There's no way that we have 9 billion people on this planet. There's no way that the American population is 380 million. I don't care how good our census actually is. The census was created to lie. Not created to lie, but organized along the way to ensure that lies come in. And that's why the Democrats fought so hard in 2020 to ensure that the census was done their way to count all the illegal immigrants. All right. I'm not done with the voter stuff. Oh my God, we got off of it. But so what we're talking here with the post office is I don't think that the post office stuff is going to be integrated prior to the midterm elections because of basically the amount of lawsuits that are going to come, Mark Elias, the weaponized lawyers and so forth that are going to fight it, as well as the amount of states that are not giving up their voter rolls to the United States Postal Service. So the Postal Service actually has the ability to reject these mail-in ballots as they come in for states that are non-compliant with turning over their voter rolls or those QR codes. So this is going to be really interesting to see how that actually flows and goes out. And it's not depriving people of voting because people have the option to actually vote in person. That mail-in ballot is like a privilege that is given. It's not a right. The right to vote is an in-person thing that you can do out there. So that is one thing. So what do we need? We need a declaration of a national emergency on election integrity and infrastructure. Wayne Allen Root was saying that you don't need predicate to declare a national emergency. Yes, you do. You need legal predicate. The Congress can actually fight you on this, and they will legitimately win. And this can be fought within the court structure. It will take a long time, but you do need legal predicate. And Donald Trump has already established legal predicate for a national emergency on election integrity and infrastructure. Why is that important? Because the next step is simply to declare the national emergency. And then the states have to comply with the implementation. And if the states do not comply with implementation, then that becomes a violation of a national security threat, of which becomes prosecutable by whoever is denying that, whether it's the Secretary of State or the governors. And I think that actually the Trump administration would follow through with prosecuting governors and Secretary of States who would basically not comply with the national security, the national emergency, which is a national security directions. And I think that we're coming into this. Elon Musk is on the list of mega donors fueling Republicans to lead Democrats in big dollar fundraising of nearly $500 million. Remember, we told you that Democrats are basically bankrupt. And this is one of the other reasons we know that they're going out the door, that this is probably one of the last elections that you're going to see your traditional liberal left Democrats within. If they lose as bad as we think and believe that they are going to lose, then what you are going to see is an exodus from the Democrat Party. That's kind of what we were talking about. Excuse me. Now, why is it important? Because the Democrat National Committee had to put up their building up as collateral to take out a $16 million loan for the midterm elections, of which they only have $14 million on hand. And I mean, you have Maine's governor who had to drop out of her race because she was broke and had no more campaign funds. Act Blue has been, in a sense, shut down. And I love the idea that nobody's even talking about with Act Blue, because Act Blue is under federal investigation for taking in foreign campaign financing. Basically, how they laundered money from foreign countries and foreign influence, as well as USAID money going overseas and coming back in, and then put that into the coffers of Democratic candidates. And this is one of the biggest methodologies of how they've raised so much money over the course of the last 20 years in elections. Well, once they became under federal investigation, that foreign influence money stopped. Once USAID got shut down, that money stopped. And what we're seeing is we're not even seeing anywhere near the numbers that we even saw in the 2024 election coming in for the Democrats, which is showing you as well that they probably don't have the numbers that they always prepped up to say that they had. Remember, Joe Biden got, 92 million votes in the 2020 election. Barack Obama only got 83 million. And how do you equate that? Well, you can only equate that through the amount of money that you're raising, the census data, the amount of people out there voting. You can't have that in a legitimate election structure where you're going to have 93 million Democrats, people vote for Joe Biden. It's impossible. The actual real number of voters that went out there and voted for Joe Biden was somewhere probably closer to 37 million in 2020. I shit you not. And I think that we're about to see that reflection of that within the campaign financing over the course of the next year, 2 years with the Democrats, that their funds are going to decrease by 60, 70%. Because of what the Trump administration is doing, of which is going to lead to the end of the Democrat Party. Hence why Elon Musk injecting $500 million in is like easy, smart. So Trump last week announced the. Actually, we're going to do a quick transition, and we're about to get into the more unrestricted warfare, global economic transition part of this. That was just the first 5 stories that I had. Just to talk about before I got into the actual conversation I wanted to have tonight. So I hope you guys are cool with hanging out with me for a little while, because this is probably going to be a little bit longer of a show than usual. 1,700 over there watching live on Rumble. Hey, if you are on Rumble and you are watching live right now, I want you to hit that thumbs up. I want you to give it a thumbs up. If you are on YouTube, which I think we got a little over 900 watching on YouTube, give a thumbs up on over there. I want to see who's going to give more thumbs up. Is it Rumble or is it YouTube? Which one of you are going to give more thumbs up? Because right now, YouTube looks like it's doing pretty damn good. Rumble, just saying. Okay. Quick transition, then we're going to go into the blunt of this, unrestricted warfare and the economic transition. I hear a lot about crypto, but there's the part most people miss. Crypto was created so you could actually own and control your money. After the 2008 financial crisis, Bitcoin was designed as an alternative to banks. So instead of a bank holding your money, delaying transfers, or limiting access, you are in control. If you've ever had to wait for a transfer to clear, you've felt that problem. Now, fast forward today, everyone's heard of crypto, but getting started still feels complicated. That's why I use Rumble Wallet. Takes all the complexity and makes it simple. Choose what you want: Bitcoin, dollar-backed stable coins, or even digital gold backed by real gold. No complicated setup. It connects with MoonPay, so you can use your credit card, debit card, or bank and be up and running in minutes. Once you're set up, you can even support your favorite Rumble creators like me directly. So do this now. Scan the QR code or click the link in the description and download Rumble Wallet. From there, you can set up your wallet, tap a buy, and you are in the game. In just a few minutes, you can go from hearing about crypto to actually owning some. And I'm gonna say this here, is that I would download the Rumble Wallet. In the next year, you're probably going to use it, and you're going to use it more so than you've ever thought. Because when we talk about the economic transition part of things, that's where this is going to get real. So the other day, Donald Trump was talking about the Keystone XL pipeline. It's like, oh my God, I'm going to completely eliminate Canada's tariffs because we came to a deal in the XL pipeline. Well, Canada reneged on that. Now Trump administration is going to impose a 50% tariff on Canadian goods after Ottawa failed to finalize the deal. And Mark Carney's just like, but no, we got to do it our way. And Mark Carney's not realizing that they are heading into the structure of becoming the 51st state of the United States. I think that we'll probably see the end of Canada. I love you guys. I think that we're moving towards the end of Canada here soon. That we're about to watch Canada self-implode and most of it be absorbed by the United States. I'm pretty sure my Canadian followers are like, "Fuck you, dude." And sorry for the women out there who are like, "Josh, I would share you to more people except for your cursing and your crass language." Well, I'm sorry. But Shiski said, "Josh, you are loved and appreciated very much." Well, thank you. And I know my language kind of goes out sometimes, but listen, it's Saturday. Let's have a little fun. I don't even have an alcoholic beverage in front of me. What would you do if I showed up with like a whiskey on the rocks and a cigar in my mouth and be like, "What's up, guys? Let's have some fun here. Whiskey and Beards." That was a show we were going to start a while back. Whiskey and Beards. All right. 16 million barrels of oil moved out of the Strait of Hormuz over the last night. That's matching almost pre-war oil flow. Do you understand how important that is? Because none of those barrels came from Iran. Iran's President Pezeshkian has urged the regime to end the war amid rising U.S. pressures. I don't know who this journalist is, Hamadraza Azizi. He's a researcher and analyst on Iran and the Middle East, associate at an institution. Good dude, but he put out this assessment, and this assessment is spot on. And for everybody out there like, "Oh, Trump lost Iran," listen, talk to me about that situation. We want to listen. So one of the things that I'm really, really big about is if you're going to have a stance on something, be able to defend your stance and articulate what you're saying. That's just how I am. I've always said that, hey, I'll go on and talk to anybody about any of these topics, and I'm happy to debate them as well. But a lot of people are like, "Oh, Trump lost the Iran war." Trump did not lose the Iran war. Are you kidding me? Have you even watched what's happened with the Iran war and what it's done to the global infrastructure and the global financial system? What it's done to Europe, the EU energetically, what it's done to China economically, what the signal is that it sends directly to China, what it did to the whole infrastructure that the deep state and the globalists were utilizing through Iran to basically control global energy costs. But nobody watches these things. So Iran's growing debate over how to end the war, the differences within Iran's leadership over how to proceed with the war is becoming increasingly visible. And this is what I've been talking about over the course of the last few months, is that you have, or actually the course of the last few years, is you have factionalization that has occurred within the IRGC, within the clergies, the theocracy, and so forth, is that you have different factions, and different factions are aligning in different ways. And this has been one of the biggest problems with Iran over the course of the last 6 months that is being exploited by the Trump administration specifically. He said today, which was yesterday, President Mossad Pezeshkian and Parliament Speaker Mohammed Bagher Ghalibaf made unusually direct comments about the need to end the war and the economic costs of continuing it. 16 million barrels just crossed through the strait yesterday, almost pre-war numbers. Ghalibaf said that regardless of how much military power Iran possesses, if people are hungry and there is no economic growth, the country cannot endure. Security, he argued, cannot be sustained without a functioning economy. He then added that as someone with military background, we know the value of peace better than those who talk about peace. The last point is important. Ghalibaf has increasingly positioned himself alongside Pezeshkian in arguing for a diplomatic way out while pushing back against hardliners who portray such an approach as capitulation. Pezeshkian was even more direct. The war must end at some point. His argument was that Iran should end it now, while Tehran still believes it is negotiating from a position of strength rather than wait until its economic situation deteriorates further. He also lashed out at critics of his administration, saying those sitting outside of the ring have little understanding of the pressures that the government is actually facing. These economic comments come amid increasingly open acknowledgments of Iran's economic pressures. Central Bank Governor Abdel Nasser Hemeti recently admitted on state television that Iran cannot sell its oil because of the blockade. Trump's new economic pressure campaign is making the situation even more difficult. There is also a growing concern about Hormuz before the latest 2 weeks of fighting. Ghalibaf had already warned that the strait has strategic value only as long as ships continue to use it. If traffic remains disrupted, other countries will inevitably search for alternatives. That appears to be happening. Reports that millions of barrels of oil are already being moved through alternative routes are now being cited by the more pragmatic camp, and evidence that Iran cannot rely indefinitely on distribution in Hormuz as its main source of leverage. This is consistent with the broader problem he discussed earlier. Iran can impose substantial costs through Hormuz, but it cannot remain in a permanent state of confrontation with the U.S. and the Gulf nation states. Now, this is what we've called the war of economic attrition. The problem is that hardliners also have a point. According to them, even if Tehran is prepared to return to diplomacy, there is little indication that Trump wants to return to the previous terms. His new economic campaign suggests that Washington may instead use Iran's growing difficulties to demand more. He's absolutely right on that. This is creating a vicious circle. The longer the confrontation continues, the stronger the economic case for diplomacy becomes. But the more Washington increases pressure, the harder it becomes for Iranian leaders to make concessions about appearing to capitulate. Guys, that's game theory. This is all game theory 101. So what happens next? And this is probably the most important part that he put here. What is becoming clearer, however, is that an important part of Iran's leadership now believes that the current situation is not sustainable and that the military leverage accumulated during the war needs to be translated into diplomatic outcomes sooner than later. Now, why is this so important? So one of the things that we look at is there was, I forget the guy's name. I think he's an economist, or maybe he's a military guy, but he was on Bannon and he was talking about how, like, well, if Donald Trump is doing this economic war right now with Scott Bessent and it's working, well, that's great, but why the hell didn't they think of this back in February? Because it wouldn't have worked back in February. And the reason it wouldn't have worked back in February is if you still had Ayatollah Khomeini, you still had the IRGC commanders and complete power structures in place, if they still had a Navy and an Air Force and thousands upon thousands of ballistic missiles, then going in there and putting this economic pressure on Iran by blockading the Strait of Hormuz would have cost thousands upon thousands of American military deaths and the sinking of a lot of our ships and our assets. That's why that didn't happen. But instead what you had was a decapitation event that took out a massive front of their leadership. Then you had months of various different bombardments that, unfortunately did kill a few Americans, but not that many who have been lost if this was done another way. We are actually at the point now to where a naval blockade works, will work, and can be sustained. We are in the war of economic attrition to where we're going to have a capitulation of Iran. And that capitulation of Iran is most likely going to drive an internal civil war between IRGC hardliners and the political establishment within Iran. And I think that this is one of the purposes of what Trump has been doing with all of this over the course of the last 6 months. Now, that internal civil war, what is that going to look like? most likely is people are going to rise up at some point in time and start demanding food and wages and payment for wages, and they're going to start to get pissed off. And the first people they're going to go after is the political establishment. And the political establishment is going to stand up and say, hey, it's not us, it's them. It's the IRGC hardliners, and the military rule will come in. And then what you're going to see is a power vacuum happen as a great transition happens within the infrastructure of Iran. If the people truly do rise up and win, you will see the IRGC hardliners and probably the theocracy be thrown out of the country and move towards a more westernized approach economically. At least that's my guess of what would happen in Iran. But that process, that's going to take a year to two to unfold like that. I think that there's a much easier process, and that is that they just settle the fuck down and let their politicians handle it through diplomacy and accept the terms and stop lying and just allow it to happen like every other country has done in the past. Pretty simple, because Donald Trump has basically handed them a multi-trillion-dollar economic position, geographical position in the world. What do I mean by that? Donald Trump, through these various different deals that he's constructing with Iran, just the way that it is number one, that everything gets freed up and they get the money back, and all they have to do is denuclearize, and they just have to allow, free transition and trade and capitalism to occur through the Straits of Hormuz and kind of demilitarize that whole area. And when that happens, Iran can take part, because sanctions would be reduced over time, into the global economy. And Iran operating in the global economy, now you have the free flow of goods and services, you have technology and innovation, you have growing economic dynamics that begin to brought in that allow their people to thrive. You have trillions of dollars of revenue. They can become a very, very large economic powerhouse in the Middle East. And well, how do you ensure that once that happens, Josh, that they don't turn and then do all this over again? Well, that's why one of the main reasons that Donald Trump has been fucking arming the shit out of all the other GCC nations, and Kuwait and Bahrain and UAE and Saudi Arabia and Turkey and Qatar and even Israel and other nations. He arms the shit out of them, because then what happens is that if Iran begins to disrupt the economic system that is flourishing within the Middle East, all of the other countries that are taking part in that same economic system are going to have a problem with that. And now they can settle it themselves over there. That's what he's setting up. And it makes a lot of sense when you start to look at it in the context of unrestricted warfare. Unrestricted warfare, if you did not know, is a strategic concept popularized by two Chinese People's Liberation Army colonels in 1999. It argues that modern conflict is no longer confined to armies, missiles, and physical battlefields. A nation can weaken, pressure, or defeat an opponent through a coordinated use of economic warfare, trade and tariff warfare, financial and currency warfare, energy and resource warfare, cyber operations, information and psychological warfare, legal and regulatory restrictions, technological restrictions, intelligence operations, control of infrastructure and supply chains, diplomatic pressure, proxy conflicts, conventional military power, kinetic strikes as a final backstop. The objective is to combine multiple instruments of national power so that an adversary is strategically defeated or forced to negotiate without necessarily fighting a conventional kinetic war. Put simply, everything becomes a battlefield, and every instrument of national power becomes a weapon. Now, Trump is not formally adopting this doctrine. He's got game theory integrated heavily into this. You got Trump's dynamic integrated heavily into this. The strategy can be interpreted through the same framework, though. Tariffs as a strategic weapon. You have investments as various different parts of the realignment infrastructure that's happening here. You have reindustrialization as national defense. You have energy dominance as geopolitical leverage, choke points and strategic geography that he's doing. Venezuela, Strait of Hormuz, Strait of Malacca is probably coming next. Financial warfare, which we just talked about, this whole war of attrition that's happening with Iran. Technological warfare, artificial intelligence, the rise of artificial superintelligence, the Genesis mission, these types of things. So what we are seeing happen here is a reorganization of the United States' position within the old world global order. And Donald Trump not only reestablishing our position, but then reorganizing how it was all being conducted, how business was being done. And this is hugely important because what it brings about is this idea that we are in a position right now of what we call the silent war. And so the silent war is this Cold War between the United States and China in the advancement towards artificial superintelligence. And when you start to understand this silent war, you begin to realize the proxy wars that are going on that are fighting. You begin to realize the geoeconomic moves that are happening to restructure against each other in both different ways of how this works. You begin to see why $20 trillion of investment capital was earmarked for the United States over the course of the next 20 years, of which $1 trillion has already came in. Now, companies and banks and large nations who put this money up are not doing it so they can lose $1 trillion. They're doing it so they can gain a 6 or 10x ROI, return on their investment. What does that mean? When you start to look at the idea that Donald Trump has secured over $20 trillion of investment capital flowing into the United States over the course of the next 20 years, then you start to have to look at the economy completely differently. And by the way, this is all ideas of unrestricted warfare. This is how you defeat China in the long game. This is how you defeat every other nation on this planet without firing a single shot. Is you grow your economic systems, you control the choke points, the energies, you control everything that is going to run the future world. And if the future world is dominant, heavy on energy and on raw resources, then those are the parts that you focus on. You focus on the geographical areas that become choke points or areas of accessibility to these. You start to dismantle the Chinese infrastructure that was put in place over the 4 years of the Biden administration, the Belt and Roads Initiative, that basically built out new ports and new roads and industry and manufacture and processing and excavation of rare earth minerals and metals. That's why China skyrocketed in the AI race, was because of the Belt and Roads Initiative. Donald Trump went in and started liberating these nations by various different tariff renegotiations. Hey, you want to trade with the United States of America? Well, 200% tariff unless you get rid of that shit over there and do a deal with us. Smart. It's freaking unrestricted warfare. Now, Bannon today, and I disagree with Steve here, and I'm going to play what I disagree. I'm going to play what Bannon says, then I'm going to tell you what I think.
Two things going on in the world of economics and power and capital markets and all that. You have the now proposed unrestricted economic warfare of the warlord over at Treasury, Scott Bessent, that is going to be addressed, as we said the last couple of days, supposedly at a press conference sometime. Reuters reporting 2 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time sometime on Tuesday, of which he's going to walk through economic D-Day. Also, 2 weeks, basically, I think from today or yesterday, you're going to have fiscal consolidation, a report by Russ Vought and Scott Bessent to the president about both, I guess they're talking about revenue enhancements and spending cuts, a plan to calm down the bond market and show that we're not going to be on a perpetual $2 trillion a year deficit that has to be refinanced because the bond market is not responding to the intervention Scott had somewhat, but remember the bond market's massive and a couple of $1 billion saying, hey, we're going to do this in September.
Okay. So Bannon, he goes out as well and begins talking about the problem we got is that we have this too big a deficit. We have too much spending, too little revenue, and can't have $40 trillion in debt and keep adding $2 trillion a year when you have to refinance because it's a lot of its finance short. He's absolutely right on this. Absolutely right. So then the question becomes is why is the Trump administration continuing to add to the deficit? We're at $40 trillion. We're at $40 trillion right now of the national debt. And why do we keep going through this process? Why do we keep on doing this? Why do we keep spending radically out of control and all of this shit? And there's a reason for it. $40 trillion in national debt is completely unsustainable under the current economic model. But if the United States can grow nominal GDP 8 or 10-fold over the course of the next decade through AI, automation, energy abundance, advanced manufacturing, and the tokenization of real-world assets, the entire sustainability equation changes. Debt is not measured in isolation. It's measured against a productive capacity, revenue, and asset base supporting it. Change the denominator and you change the equation. Ain't that the truth? Now, why is that interesting? Because I had a clip ready to say why it was interesting, but I apparently don't have that clip right here in front of me. Where the hell is that clip at? What the hell? It was right here. Where the hell is it? Come on, it was a Scott Percent clip. It was perfect. There it is. Okay, I got it. Now listen to what Scott Percent says. Treasury Secretary. Listen to what he says. You just heard me say it. Listen to what he says.
Secretary, yeah, if you could answer facing the cameras. But for the $40 trillion mark that we passed for the national debt, would you comment on that, and how do we reverse that?
Yeah, look, the 40 trillion is a big number. It is smaller when we look at the publicly traded amount because our Social Security funds and other government entities hold a substantial amount. And what we're going to do, we're going to have to grow our way out of this. And as I talked about at G20 in Asheville, we are going to talk about the U.S. growth strategy and encourage the rest of the world to come along with us. We are also, I announced that Director Russ Vogt and I have been tasked with looking at fiscal consolidation. I think
So we have to grow our way out of this. What is he saying? What he's trying to say is that there is a plan in place right now to grow the U.S. economy 8 to 10-fold over the course of the next 20 years. Then you say, well, Josh, how is that going to happen? This is why the new financial infrastructure is coming to light. I'm not talking about QFS or Nassara Jassara shit like that. I'm talking about legitimate, in the books plans that the Trump administration has already put in place, things that are already happening, things that are evolving right now. Okay. Number one is we go into $20 trillion of declared earmarked money coming into the United States over the course of the next $20, of which has already came into our country and is already building out, specifically Abilene, Texas, and various other places, data centers, all of this stuff. That's one thing. Then what you have is things like this. Franklin Templeton CEO Chris Perkins says tokenized equity markets will go from 0 to 127 trillion once liquidity arrives. The current U.S. GDP is $100 trillion. Franklin Templeton CEO Chris Perkins is basically saying that tokenized equity markets will go from 0 to 127 trillion overnight. Okay. How about this one? NVIDIA, they provided $105 billion in financing towards OpenAI's massive Ohio data center. Well, that's interesting. Huang, their CEO, says that OpenAI data center in Ohio could generate over $600 billion in revenue the first year. Do you understand? I mean, do people understand what we're talking about when we say tokenization or when we talk about the AI world that's coming about right now? And people are like, well, dude, AI is going to take... I don't even want to have that conversation right now. But you have to understand about the market dynamic. You want to get back to the free market. You want to have free market capitalism. You have to have a position and process in place that keeps all of this stuff on the record book so nobody can manipulate it. That's tokenization. Where you actually own an asset. I mean, think about this. Do you actually own an asset? Think about it. If the deed of trust to your house was kept in a safe and your house burned down, well, that's it. You don't have your deed of trust anymore, right? Or what if it was kept at the county because they're all filed with the county? The county's going to have a copy of it. Great. What happens if both of those things burn down the same night? No proof of ownership. Well, what happens when you have the paper copy, but then you also have a digital infrastructure? You have a digital copy that sits within something that you own and control, and that you have the highest encryption of passwords to the accessibility of it, and that you can actually move it. What happens when your whole 401k portfolio isn't managed by Fidelity anymore, but it is now managed by you under your own wallet? That stocks that you are actually owned by you. Like, things are actually owned by you, that there's no bank intermediaries with your money anymore. That's the whole dream and idea behind crypto and a lot of this tokenized framework that's coming into place. And a lot of it is happening. This is what the Genius and the Clarity Act are all about. We beat central bank digital currencies at least till 2032. Now, is there a place for them? Yeah, maybe, but I'm completely anti-central bank. I don't want the central banks. I don't want banks involved at all with any of this stuff. And so people are like, but XRP is going to rule and dominate. XRP is a central bank freaking coin. You can't have XRP and then tell me you hate the Federal Reserve in the same sentence. It doesn't work. You want decentralized frameworks and platforms to where you actually have power and control over that money, and what the system that's being built actually allots for this in the context of the United States of America becoming the crypto mining capital of the world. When Donald Trump says that, the United States of America is going to become the crypto mining capital of the world. Well, that's going to be interesting. What are they going to mine? They're going to mine Bitcoin. They're going to mine they're going to have all different types of data centers where usability for Ethereum and Solana and all these other blockchains, the utility is integrated into the tokenized systems. And then these systems are operated throughout infrastructure owned and operated by the United States, by American citizens. Fractionalized stocks are owned within these data center structures. And that $600 billion of revenue is going to produce, $5 billion to $10 billion in profitability, which we distributed to the dividends of all those people who own fractionalized stocks, and you'll receive it in your wallet one day. Not only that, there'll be partial ownership by the United States federal government that will be kept in a sovereign wealth fund and then distributed when there's profitability at the end of the year through the dividends, after everything is all bought and paid for, back to the people who actually are the true owners of it. Like 10% of Intel, that's worth $40 billion. The Trump administration is moving forth right now with a complete economic overhaul, not only of the United States of America, but with the whole global economy. And this is what we're seeing through the unrestricted warfare tactics utilized by Trump and the game theory that he's playing with China, and how he's beaten them at their own game, how he's beaten the European old guard and the central banks in the London bankers at their own game. They had created a system that benefited them and centralized all power and control over the last 100 years into their hands. The problem was the system was incredibly fragile because the system required the United States to participate. The moment the United States pulled out of that system, the system begins to crumble and collapse, and Donald Trump knew this. And he knew that if he can just get the right people in the right places of that system, their global system begins to crumble. And it is. And that's what's happening. And it doesn't matter how far along they progressed within their dreams of a new world order. The fact is that Donald Trump came in and he rewrote the terms, renegotiated the contracts and the deals. He rug pulled the globalists at every different level. And now, right now, the part that he is doing is taking back, but also giving back the accessibility to resources and controlling global resources interim for a period of time, so that we can beat China in this war, but also remove the various different globalist infrastructures that have controlled those markets for the longest time. We are there. And so we are moving into a tokenized world that is going to be birthed in the United States of America. New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, all of this is moving towards it. The United States is going to stop borrowing money through various different bonds issued by the Federal Reserve and sold to foreign adversaries. Instead, what's going to happen is you're going to see bonds that are going to be based upon, collateralized by a sovereign wealth fund that's worth $200-300 trillion and appreciating in its assets every year. And you'll see a 25 or 50-year Bitcoin or gold bond be issued to a stablecoin company, and it's going to pay 3% interest until it comes to maturity. But guess what? If those assets appreciate 100-200%, like Bitcoin is set to do over the course of the next 10 years, if they appreciate within that time, well, guess what? That debt now pays itself off. That debt now becomes paid for because of the appreciation of the collateralized assets that back it through that bond. That's the system that's being developed right now by the Trump administration. And people are like, but nothing's happening. No, the idea of what they believed and wanted to happen isn't happening, and it's not going to happen. Reality is never going to be the manifestation of what you thought it was. It's always going to be something different. So we got a lot going on. There was a little bit of other things. We talk about Franklin Templeton. I'm not going to get into the Turkey-Iran thing. That we can save that for next week. I think there's going to be some news over the course of the next 5 days that's going to come out. I'm going to say this again. 5 days. Tuesday, Wednesday time frame. There's going to be some bombshells coming out this next week. John Solomon, waiting for it, buddy. So John Solomon, I think, is going to have some new information coming out over the course of the next few years. Oh my God, yes. Trump smelly taint is posting all throughout Rumble. Who gives a fuck? You know, dude, you can have your own. I hate him because he didn't do this. It's not happening the way that you said it was going to happen. It's not happening the way that you wanted it to happen. Oh, poor you. Pull your fucking tears up off the ground and go out there and fucking cry to somebody else. That's what I have to say. Anyways, so guys, we're going to head to the live Q&A.